Yeah, thank you very much. So we will use the additional time to start now with Dr. Med Frank Malinoski, Chief Medical Officer of Liquidity Technologies and Vice Chair of Nanomedicines Research Triangle, North Carolina, to talk about the Nanomedicines Alliance, how industry builds its network first achievements.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and my thanks to the organizers in Clinam, and particularly Beat, who's received a lot of thanks, and to you all for being here this morning for this discussion. What I'm going to talk about is, as here, an alliance of industry relative to issues in nanomedicines, and the common things that we have, and in particular, not only to my colleagues who presented today, but anyone else involved in getting those products to market, creating and influencing the pathway and the road to actually approval of these products. But so let me start by giving you a little bit of the reason why I'm here, why I'm personally invested in nanotechnology, and I think it's captured in these two quotes. The first from Albert Einstein, saying that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And that's where nanotechnology and I think nanomedicines are really coming to bear. All of our medicines today have warts. Nanotechnology and has a way to solve some of those, whether it's in duration of activity or delivery to particular sites. And I think it's so that's a guiding principle for me and why I'm excited about nanotechnology. The second one is a little more complex, but someone talked about the moon and the Apollo mission, and yesterday one of our speakers, and indeed the original moonshot, and you know we have a moonshot in the U.S. to cure cancer today, but the original moonshot, this quote from Neil Armstrong, that when he stepped on the moon, he said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." I think the lesson here is that each one of these products as they come forward will be seen as a small step. But and clearly it's a giant leap for the technology, but the other piece to this is that most people remember him stepping onto the moon, right? And seeing that live. What people don't realize is everything that went to make that happen. The billions of dollars, the thousands of people, you know, and the hours that were put in to actually get him and the entire space mission to get someone to the moon. And I think you have to appreciate that within this field of nanomedicine, that you may be part of that wave, may not be that one step, but you were part of getting us there. So let me now talk about kind of who we are, why we do what we do, how we do what we do in nanomedicines and in the nanomedicine technology. Now, I have to start by saying a little bit about my company, Liquidity Technologies. We're a platform company spanning from millimeter down to nanometer platform for the production of nanomedicines. And actually, this slide is to illustrate how I came to be involved in the Nanomedicines Alliance. The FDA had put out a request for comment on pending guidance relative to nanomedicines, and we created our own response at Liquidia. As I went through looking at the public comments, I was seeing other comments from other companies, and I saw this comment from what was already existing, this Nanomedicines Alliance. And I realized that some of my comments that we put together were slightly in contrast to some of the other comments that were made by some of the other companies and the Alliance. And what was critical for me in that was that we can do a better job of aligning what we need in industry to give a single voice to regulators and others. So a little bit of who we are, and I'll talk more about this. We are pharmaceutical and biotech companies involved in the translation of the discoveries to commercial products. This is a shot of one of our board meetings. We're a small group at this point, but growing. This was in Washington, where our secretariat has their offices. You can see the Washington Monument under the C in biotech there. We were out on a beautiful day like you've provided for us here, out on our rooftop there. Some of the member companies, Mariana's here from AstraZeneca, and I am advertising for companies that are interested in being part of this coalition to join us. We continue to add and hopefully not subtract too many companies as we go along, but we are in a growth phase. So why do we exist? I told you, I guess this is the best way to describe that. You know, the regulatory authorities are defining nano. This is the simplistic definition. You'll hear more about it in the other session. You know, the U.S., the primary definition is that you're less than 100 nanometers in one direction. For the EU, well, okay, less than 1,000 nanometers, and you're engineered. So to distinguish things like natural products, like viruses, that by their nature are nano, this is meant to distinguish those. Now, the regulatory authorities have given some caveats to this, but, you know, from our perspective, why is it that the regulators are defining what we know? And this gets to the last point of who knows best, but the experts doing the nanomedicines work. And that's not to be arrogant, but to say that we should apply what we know to these policies and regulations. And the other piece, and I think we heard a little bit about this in one of the previous talks, is that actually some of the larger pharmaceutical companies need to be convinced about nanomedicines. They aren't as embracing as the rest of us. And the two industry organizations that exist in the US, bio and pharma, have no nanotechnology agenda. They aren't lobbying Congress. They aren't working with the FDA to ensure that that pathway for nanomedicines approval is an appropriate one to go forward with. So this is why we came together. How we come together is driving membership so that we have a strong and a diverse and a consistent voice to try and, again, develop a consensus opinion so we can present one very powerful position to regulators and policymakers. And in particular, that we don't just do that, but we reach out as advocates for this field, not only to the regulators, but also to the pharmaceutical companies that have doubts, to the legislators, and importantly, eventually, we need to be talking to the public so we avoid the issues that came up with GMOs when the public was not well informed about the promise and the potential and the risks and the benefits. As any organization, you have to know where you're going and how you're going to get there. So we have a vision, we have a mission as it relates to our activities. And I put this slide in about the scope because, like taking care of a patient's blood pressure or their cancer or their diabetes, you're not just talking about one individual piece, right? We have to talk about the entire we have to talk and understand about the entire development process to do our job well in advocating for proper regulations and policies and education around nanomedicines, so that we have to understand all of the elements while we're focused as companies to make sure. And what's unique about the industry is that last piece of approval, marketing, and life cycle management. We still have to be involved in all of the pieces of this. So what do we actually do? How do we do it, especially if you're a member of a company and thinking about joining us? So we have a forum, a legal forum, which has rules about what we can and cannot talk about. We can't talk about prices and things like that. But we are allowed to come together as a group, and we come together as biotech and medical device companies, although we could use more device companies at this point to inform us. And we put together our priority issues relative to the science, regulation, and policy. And indeed, there is science involved. In particular, you'll see one of the issues is how we're measuring nanomedicines, nanoparticles, formulations, consistency, because some of the tools are very early. Some are not widely shared or reproducible across different companies. And the last piece of what we do is educating the stakeholders that we're involved with, the large pharma companies that may be interested, and obviously the government agencies, the public, and the driving force, and it's part of this conference, is the collaboration. And to borrow from the real estate industry, it's collaborate, 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 which is one of the reasons we're here today. So we've done a number of things in the last couple of years. We've had a symposium about creating a roadmap. We have a very strong interactive dialogue with the FDA, with the working group, with the task force that you've heard from over the last couple of days. We've worked on data sharing activities, on particle size measurement techniques. We put together various roundtable discussions on these issues. We've talked about the issues of risk management. You know, this isn't all about the promise, it's about the reality of these medicines. When we have a package insert that goes out with our product, it's going to talk about adverse events, it's going to talk about efficacy, and we have to understand the risk benefit and discuss that. And we've been in meetings with the FDA and other groups like PQRA on this. And lastly, we've worked with this. You heard yesterday a little bit about the National Nanotechnology Initiative across all government agencies. We've participated with that, and indeed, we've influenced some of the nanotechnology applications outside of medicine, talking about how it is we proceed, talking about how to shape regulations, how to understand risk-benefit in that context. And believe it or not, we have a lot more in common with nanotech in solar panels and other applications than you might think in reality, in particular related to public perception. We work on publications. We have to get the news out there. We comment on federal guidance. And what's going on today, we're working actually with the FDA on a special issue on nanomedicines that will appear in the AAPS journal. We've done this comprehensive review of nanoparticle measuring technologies that we want to publish. We've now started a legislative advocacy where we're talking to the government leaders in Congress in the U.S. in particular about what should be done to support nanotechnology on the research side, on the regulatory side, on the investment side overall. Some of the investments that have been made here in Europe, we could use some of those, to be honest, in the U.S. and other places. So, and we continue to look at what's happening in a regulatory perspective. We are global, as you could remember from the list of our membership. So we do try and reach out and understand the global situation. Although I will say we are a bit U.S.-centric, we try not to be, and again, another reason to be here. We have publication that's open to the public, and we are working on various collaborations. So from this list, I'd say expanding our membership is our top plan as I wrap this up, but we will continue to follow the issues I mentioned. And lastly, I'll just leave you with our website where you can sign up to receive our electronic digest. If you're interested in joining, that's our secretariat's address there. And the picture on the bottom left here is to remind you that this is all about the end, providing that benefit and the hope, and not just the red ribbon that you see here, but any ribbon you can imagine. That's what's bringing us together as an industry to ensure we can provide that hope in a rapid and effective, safe way. Thank you.